A very good morning, good afternoon, good evening to my colleagues who are joining from across the world in the BRICS Business Forum. Welcome to this forum. We have a very appropriate topic today to discuss, which is reimagining healthcare sector's public-private partnership for better healthcare outcome. I have my colleagues here in the panel discussion, and I will introduce them one by one. Before that, I think it is more appropriate during this time that this session becomes the most important part where the BRICS Forum can contribute to their people. This pandemic has created a newer kind of challenges and also the weakness in our overall preparedness on healthcare. There were supply issues, whether the vaccines was not available, medicine was not available, disposable devices were not available, or equipments were not available. The world was not unable to create capabilities to supply to everybody who needed at a time. And that's why it is important that a kind of a collaboration between the BRICS country can actually come forward to support the healthcare system globally and to make sure that this can happen. What is another important part for all of us is to understand this emergency use authorization is a new animal on the table now, which is talking about approving newer therapies with limited data when there is a need for the patient. But I think that has to become a kind of a standard thing going forward. And one need to really define and find, the regulators have to find ways to ensure that anytime there are healthcare issues, we are able to provide regulatory support to the people who do research and development on neurotherapies and medicine. With these few words, let me introduce my colleagues who are on this panel. The first person on the panel is Ms. Jeanette Vaz, co-founder and president of Sabin Group. Ms. Vaz is a co-founder and president of Sabin Group, one of the largest players in diagnostic medicine in the country, which is presently present in 12 states and districts in Brazil. She was elected in 2016 and 17 by Forbes magazine as one of the most powerful women in Brazil, as one of the outstanding women in the healthcare sector. For the 2 consecutive years, she was one of the best business managers in Brazil by the Valor Literature magazine, and she was always heading Sabin at that time. I have also Mr. Anatoly Mossman, Director General, Well Pharma Russia. Mr. Mossman is CEO of Well Pharma LLC since 2020. In 2020, Well Pharma was awarded 17th place in the first Forbes rating of 20 best pharmaceutical companies in Russia. The company's portfolio includes more than 160 units of medicine, 75% of which is in the list of essential and essential medicines. Under the leadership of Anatoly, projects were successfully implemented that contribute to the development of region, ensure drug safety, and preserve the health of the nation. The project counteracting epidemic disease, production of antiviral drugs, expanding the production of drugs that relieve symptoms of the disease, developed by the Ministry of Health of Russian Federation, and commission of a new production building for manufacture of pharmaceutical substance, bismuth tripotassium dicitrate, which is included in the list of strategically important medicine raw material and introduction and launch of this drug happened during this period. I have my colleague from India, Dr. Devlina Chakravarti. Dr. Chakravarti has started her career in 1993 as a radiologist trained from Mumbai University. She did fellowship and preceptorship program from University of Berlin, Germany, UCLA, Los Angeles, and Birmingham and Boston, and heading the neck and body imaging unit there. She worked as a senior faculty and program director in radiology in different reputed hospitals in New Delhi after joining Artemis in 2003. She strongly believes in ethical practice in healthcare and quality of service. She believes private hospital can make profits without profiteering. She's a process and system driven person and believes strongly in quality and efficacy of healthcare. I'm a colleague from China, Ms. Zhu Jingzheng. Dr. Zhu has been working in the healthcare investment and cross-border cooperation since 1990. Dr. Zhu returned to China with a Silicon Valley AI and big data team and founded Meridian Medical Network Corporation in Beijing in 2010 with a mission to make health and wellness services universal and sustainable. Meridian has structuralized healthcare big data and developed the next generation digital healthcare service platform, the 3-in-1 integrated cloud platform for AI services, primary healthcare AI cloud, family wellness care AI cloud, and specialist AI cloud. Dr. Jingzheng Zhu is recently awarded in 2021 as the Global Social Entrepreneurs Pioneer Award. I have my colleague and co-chair, Dr. Stowers from Aspen Pharmaceuticals. Dr. Stowers, the Aspen Pharmaceuticals senior executive responsible for strategic trade development, was instrumental in introducing the first generic ARV on the African continent developed by Aspen, which has gone on to have of thousands of lives in South Africa and Africa being saved. Dr. Stowers has over 30-year experience in South African and international pharmaceutical industry and is a recipient of honorary doctorate conferred by the University of Witwatersrand. Thank you very much for a patient listening to me, and we will now move to the panel discussion. The BRICS countries have already been discussing for BRICS Vaccine Research and Development Center, as COVID-19 pandemic apparently brought cooperation in healthcare sector as the top agenda. However, there is a need to explore collaboration in vaccine and R&D beyond COVID-19. What are some of these ways in which BRICS can come and join hands in developing and providing vaccination is what we are going to discuss today. I would first invite Ms. Janet Vaz to basically elaborate what are the importance of vaccination for Brazilian economy in short and medium term, and why? What are the actual challenges in the health concept with COVID-19 pandemic, and what is going to stay going forward? Is it possible to say that there will be new highlights in the World Health System, considering the importance of immunization and science, but also having the face of obstacle of dissemination of misinformation about the medical treatment? we would like to hear from you, your views on what are going to be the effect of all of these in the healthcare outcome in the Brazilian economy. Over to you, Ms. Vaz.
Bom dia.
Good morning.
Boa tarde, boa noite.
Good afternoon and good evening at the same time.
Sou Janete Vaz, vou fazer uma explanação
My name is Janete Vaz.
sobre pouco de programa que foi muito positivo no Brasil.
I would like to talk a little bit about a program which was very positive in Brazil.
Eu e Sandra, há 37 anos, temos uma história de atuação em causas da saúde e relacionadas ao protagonismo
For 37 years, we
feminino.
have this thing that I would like to talk regarding the healthcare system in Brazil.
E em 2013, fundamos
In 2013,
com uma grande empresária brasileira, Luiz
with
Helena
a
Trajano,
big businessman in Brazil, we founded this company.
o Grupo Mulheres do Brasil, que hoje é composto por mais de 90 mil mulheres.
It's a women's group which is composed of 90,000 women in Brazil, from Brazil.
Neste grupo, a partir
this
dos
group
grandes desafios da pandemia,
has had
nasceu
big,
o projeto
challenges
Unidos pela Vacina.
From this pandemic, and this challenge was an outcome of this pandemic.
Que mobilizou a sociedade civil, organizando diversas frentes de trabalho para viabilizar a vacina até setembro de 2021.
And this group took this challenge and made it feasible to make the vaccine by September 2021.
O movimento busca complementar políticas públicas, trabalhando de braços dados com o poder público e assim aumentando a eficácia, eficiência e otimização dos recursos.
And we worked with the public sector authorities so that our resources should be mobilized and so that we could achieve our goal.
O programa trabalha de forma alinhada e sintonizada com os governos federal, municipal e principalmente o municipal, que está próximo do cliente.
In fact, we work with the governments, with the central government, with the state government, and the municipalities, which are the closest to work with to achieve our goals.
E com proposta de diálogo aberto e transparente na identificação das necessidades que poderiam causar a ruptura do processo da vacina, independente da vacina, que era um problema do governo.
We, in fact, worked together, but we worked independently from the challenge that the government had of making the vaccine available, and there could have been a gap between the two. So we worked independent of that. We continue to work.
As primeiras iniciativas foi formação e definição dos papéis de cada time, executor, gestor, comunicação e operacional.
The first aim of our work was to identify the teamwork, which would be execution, identification within the group for our tasks.
Depois, a construção de uma plataforma para cadastro das necessidades básicas por meio de uma pesquisa.
And then we needed to form a platform which was based upon the necessity.
Esta pesquisa foi realizada em 5.570 municípios do Brasil.
And this investigation, this research was carried out in more than 5,000 municipalities across Brazil.
Durante 7 semanas.
During 7 weeks' time.
O portal foi importante para monitoramento, auditoria e decisões de novos passos.
And this portal was therefore important to monitor the progress of this task.
Mobilizamos empresas, empresários, cidadãos, embaixadas para a viabilização de doações que foram diagnosticadas no início.
Therefore, we mobilized embassies, we mobilized businesses and business people to come together so that this initiative could be feasible.
Com isso, conseguimos entregar 530 mil itens que viabilizaram a vacina chegar na população o mais rápido possível, sem ruptura, com qualidade e segurança.
And our aim was that without any rupture, the vaccine should reach the people.
Este era o nosso propósito.
This was our main aim.
Entre os itens entregues foram câmaras frias, caixas térmicas, computadores.
For this, we needed ice boxes, we needed transporting, we needed storage facilities.
Termômetros, ar-condicionado, tablets, drive-thrus.
We needed thermometers, we needed drive-thrus, we needed proper medical facilities for these vaccines.
EPIs, celulares, entre outros.
And also we needed mobile phones, we also needed tablets.
Também o Instituto SEIB mobilizou no programa de voluntariado da empresa mais de 2.000 colaboradores na campanha, direto na campanha.
In fact, we recruited more than 2,000 volunteers directly to work on this program through voluntary programming.
Yes. Na terceira fase, foi uma comunicação, sustentação do movimento pelas redes sociais, mídias, adesão de influenciadores digitais para a campanha de orientação à população.
And on the third stage, we used the digital platforms, social platforms, social media platforms to mobilize the people and to take this message to the people.
A quarta fase foi governança de todo o processo, usando os 4 pilares: transparência, prestação de contas, equidade e responsabilidade social.
And on the fourth phase, we worked towards achieving a management of all these elements together, which included monitoring, which included putting together our main elements to be working.
E assim deixamos um legado para políticas públicas na área de saúde e como aproveitar a rede multissetorial que implementamos com o projeto Unidos pela Vacina para um pós-pandemia.
And thus we created a multi-sectoral heritage for the public authorities to take it to the public.
É um momento que pode ser seguido, modelo que pode ser seguido, ser adotado, independente do estágio de desenvolvimento industrial e econômico do país interessado, pois todos podem aprender com esta experiência.
Thus, we created a model which can be adopted by the countries which may be more or less industrialized to take this initiative to the people by any of the governments.
O movimento evidencia que a sociedade civil pode contribuir e atuar de forma alinhada e complementar com as políticas públicas, proporcionando agilidade, otimizando recursos, sem qualquer conotação de assistencialismo.
And this helps to understand that how civil society can play a role in working with the public authorities and thus making the program successful.
Esta é a grande lição a ser compartilhada com essa experiência.
This is our great experience that I wanted to share with you all.
Atuar como unidade, descartando as diferenças, construindo pontes, laços, conexões,
that is overcoming our differences, but working together, making bridges,
cujo alicerce era um só: cooperação em prol da vida, a vida dos seres humanos.
the aim was cooperation and saving mankind's lives. Thank you for hearing my presentation.
Em relação à pergunta de número 1,
As to the response to the question number 1,
qual a importância da vacinação para a economia brasileira no curto e no médio prazo? A maior importância é salvar vidas e salvar a economia.
what is the challenge to the Brazilian economy of the vaccination program? I would say the biggest challenge is to save lives of the people.
O impacto da vacinação é estabilidade, segurança psicológica para a população, otimismo, sentimento de superação e retomada da confiança.
And this is also goes together to create a confidence among the people in this program of that we can save their lives.
A imunização da população contra o Covid será o ponto-chave para a recuperação da atividade após a crise maior vivida.
And this immunization is going to be very important for the biggest medical crisis or health crisis that the humankind has ever confronted.
As vacinas fazem parte de um conjunto de atividades de prevenção desenvolvidas pela atenção primária.
And these vaccines are basically part of the primary preventive measure for saving people's lives.
Não é só ter vacinas, nós descobrimos que precisamos de muitas outras coisas.
And it is not just about vaccines. We discovered that there are many other things also.
Mas é uma das prioridades na revisão do sistema de saúde brasileiro e de diversos outros países também.
And in fact, it also led us to understand that there was a need for revision of the health services in Brazil and probably many other countries as well.
O Brasil tem um dos maiores sistemas de saúde universal do mundo.
In fact, Brazil has a system of universal health in Brazil, probably in the world. It is the biggest such universal health system in the world.
O SUS, que é o Sistema Único de Saúde aplicado pelo Ministério da Saúde, foi copiado e muito bem sucedido em outros países da Europa.
This program is called SUS, and it was started by the Ministry of Health in Brazil. And when it became such a big success, it was copied, it was replicated by many governments in Europe.
Estamos ancorados em uma extensa rede de atenção primária, com unidades básicas de saúde que procuram responder ao contexto de emergência pública.
So we created a network of primary health centers across the countries, and the people could immediately rush to these primary health centers.
Mas a estratégia da saúde da família precisa de reestruturação.
But the healthcare to the families now needs a restructuring.
As equipes conhecem a população de perto, com base nisso, identificam as necessidades e vulnerabilidades de cada região.
And these primary centers understand the needs of the family because they know them, they understand their histories, and therefore it is necessary that we strengthen them at regional levels.
Para uma ação singular de cuidar da população.
For the unique needs of the populations.
É comum o sistema público lançar mão do sistema privado para diversas patologias que requer especialistas.
In fact, this was the public system which was launched, but the private parties could participate in this.
Sem esquecer as pautas voltadas à saúde da mulher e da criança, com investimento de curto, médio e longo prazo em grupos prioritários.
And these were aimed to create programs at short, medium, and long deadlines to achieve good healthcare.
Ok. Outro ponto de melhoria é a comunicação acessível e disponível.
The other point to achieve is that to make these services available.
É necessário uma comunicação entre os diferentes níveis para que tenha uma resposta efetiva e eficiente para o cuidado das pessoas.
Therefore, it is important that we create a communication at different levels with people.
O momento exige, portanto, novas configurações.
And therefore, new configurations are needed.
Para o processo de trabalho em parcerias com a população, o empresariado, para exercitarmos a solidariedade e o fortalecimento das redes.
Therefore, what is necessary is sharing and at the same time strengthening of these partnerships.
Essa é, sobretudo, uma oportunidade para fazermos mudanças essenciais baseadas na moralidade e na humanidade.
So this is also an opportunity to create new systems to face these challenges and to address the humanity.
Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Vaz, and I think we understand that a good logistic system using the technology has been developed in Brazil, and it might be interesting for other countries to explore and see that whether they can be also used in other countries. I'll now move because we have a limited time to move to Mr. Anatoly Mosman from Russia. And you know that BRICS country represents almost 40% of the world population. And for that reason, it is very important that we all work together to basically tame this pandemic. Given that, I would like to hear from you, sir, that cooperation of BRICS countries for the healthcare is vital for global disease prevention in the current COVID-19 situation. Could you share some best practices and ideas from Russia? Over to you, sir. Anatoly Mosman.
Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги. Если вы не возражаете.
Good day. If you, I will make a show of my presentation so that you could have a better idea. I am representing I'm representing a company called GeoPharm at Norway. This is a new company, and it forms part of Brightway company. This is a Russian company which has developed dynamically, and it has taken part in many projects, pharmaceutical projects in Russia. Well, Pharma is not the only company, although it is the youngest one, and it has been functioning from 2016. But before that, we used to give components to the world, to India, to China, to the rest of the world. In 2015, the management decided that we can increase our import and we can have our own production. And Kurgan was selected as a city where you could start this production. And within 9 months, the factory was practically constructed. And for this kind of volume of work, it was practically impossible if we tried to do it only through private capital, and if only it was one organization involved. We had a lot of assistance from the government. We had from the Ministry of Trade. We also had development funds of Russian Federation, and also the regional government of Kurgan. The governor of the area was very helpful. The Kurgan area is very good for business climate, which gave us a possibility to resolve any problems that we had that we faced in construction of the new factory. And as a result, the factory of 10,000 square meters was constructed, which can have production of injections and capsules. You can see the parameters. In the December, the production was already launched, and today we have more than 90 medical things, 360 professional staff we have, and some of these medication is successfully being used in fight against coronavirus. We have also constructed our own substations, and some of them is building of substance, production of substance, and then they have about production of 60 tons per year. And we were helped by the government and the regional government from Kurgan. And despite the fact that we are only 5 years old, the rating of Forbes has, for the last year, our company has reached the best company of Russia, within the 20 best companies of Russia. The support of government and the regional government was very helpful in creating and running the factory. You cannot overestimate their contribution. Starting from the application to the industrial fund, and putting in application and support to approval of the application, we did feel that we were being supported. And as you can see, the result is that it's a beautifully functional factory. As I have already said, the current situation in the country and in the world has given us a new global view. There are new viruses, and we will have to fight with them, and we will have to work out development of new generation medication, which will require a very big investment, and it will also require developments of knowledge intensive inputs. And as we said, that we'll have to work to support lives for people. And because of that, we need to work together, not only within the BRICS company, but also global collaboration. And as we have seen during the pandemic, there are challenges that are global, and they touch not only one country or one continent, but they are covering the whole world. And we have worked out 13 medical medicines, and we're also working on various forms of treatment, and we will the where we participate in working out these medications. We are developing active support from the state and set, and we have the ambition to work together with different countries. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Masman. Nice to hear that you could build a plant in just 9 months, and maybe my colleagues would like to learn one-to-one from you how and which way you can achieve such a good execution speed. I will now move to Dr. Devlina Chakrabarti. Dr. Devlina, being a healthcare specialist and has faced and treated many patients during this COVID crisis, it will be good to hear from her about the challenges that were faced and highlight some of the successes and what can be done in future in terms of collective working together between the BRICS countries. And how do we actually utilize and leverage the digital healthcare system which is emerging, particularly the telemedicine, etc. So I would, over to you, Dr. Devlina.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pankaj Patel. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to all my colleagues. So the challenge of affordability and accessibility to quality healthcare is a stark reality in India, something we cannot look away from. And different types of models, whether it is a PPP model between the private and the government players in India, or models of collaboration between different BRICS countries, is actually the need of the hour. The pandemic has woken all of us up to this huge challenge of healthcare, health delivery system. And this is the time for all of us to get together and see how we can overcome these challenges. Basically, the verticals and the verticals where all of us can come together in the sphere of health, in my opinion, is partnerships in infrastructure development. How can we build up infrastructure in quick turnaround times, effective, cost-effective manner? We can look at how do we manage and operate together if there is an opportunity, build capacity in our existing hospitals and make it more efficient, creating various IT infrastructures and digital platforms so that connectivity across the country gets better. And very important is learn from each other's best practices on material management, which is something, huge crisis in the supply chain is something that we faced during the second wave. Having said that, in India, we have great examples of public-private partnerships. And to give you one is, the pharmaceutical research and collaboration between ICMR, our Indian Council of Medical Research, and Bharat Biotech for developing the Covaxin for COVID-19 in a record time. We also have great collaboration or PPP models in healthcare at various state levels. And we are also aware of various PPP models whether it is telemedicine, teleradiology, tele-ICU managements, which has increased our reach across various states, tier B, tier C cities, and our rural areas. Having said that, we would like to hear and understand more from all our colleagues on various types of PPP models which are prevalent in their countries and how we can make it very, very effective. The main challenge that in India, we have been talking about public-private partnerships for a very long time, but this is also a time for having insights from outside of India to understand certain key challenges that we have. While we understand the PPP in our in any country, the model is high volume, low cost. But end of the day, the payers become a very key player for the success of this model. Now, if we make all PPPs free of cost, it would become very difficult in terms of sustainability for the government. And if we make it over subsidized, it will become very difficult in terms of sustainability for the private players. So we would like to learn from various nations, how do we get together to synergize, to put all our best learnings and see, because this is the next step forward, that how can we improve our healthcare through PPP, and especially what are the payer modules, you know? And also, is there a system of zoning the hospitals in PPP models in various countries? That means, you know, the various, it is not one shoe fits all kind of a situation. We have to have a central committee with representation from the government and private to discuss on the policies of the PPP model, and then look at regionally on a macro and micro level, the deliverables of our PPP healthcare models. And how can we increase our reach, increase their efficiency, and make our supply chain better? So now and what are the systems of auditing such models in your country? How do we understand the, how well are we performing? What are the trust building exercises? So quickly, I know there is a constraint of time, and what Mr. Pankaj Patel asked me, some of the challenges that we have faced as healthcare providers. The challenges were huge because nobody saw what was coming in the second wave. So be it a paucity of beds, paucity of oxygen, supplies, remdesivir, tocilizumab. So all of this, and it is not a fault finding kind of a thing, but it is to understand why did it happen, because it was an unprecedented kind of a situation. But having said so, let me tell you, the best public-private partnership came in the times of distress, where people from the government and the private, they worked shoulder to shoulder to overcome this kind of a crisis. It was not a blame game. It was not an trying to find out who went wrong, but everybody did maximum, to their maximum capacity they played. So not only when we had an oxygen kind of a crisis, not only the government did everything possible to make sure the hospital was getting the oxygen, lot of private players, lot of steel manufacturers shut off their plants to supply oxygens to where it was needed most, which was the hospital. So the success story today is, though we had unprecedented number of casualties during the second wave, the success story today is that we have managed to quickly build the infrastructure. A hospital like mine already has 4 oxygen plants installed in record time. We have looked at our supply chain, and we have already started, created newer ICUs, more ventilators, in-house oxygen generation, identifying, life-saving drugs in the ICU, looking at manpower. So what, in India, we know what resilience is all about and how do we survive through crisis. And today, let me tell you, though we are keeping an eye on the third wave, but the situation on ground is very, very much, as we speak, under control. There is stringent monitoring by the government. There is very honest reporting by all hospitals on the number of cases that we are finding. So I think that is how we have come together. And vaccination drive, not only the government, 25% of the vaccines are with people like us, the private Not only have we created vaccination centers within the hospital, we are going all out into our RWAs, removing the myth around vaccination, and we are vaccinating. And digital health, digital platforms have taken a huge leap from from teleconsulting, from telemedicine to tele-ICU monitoring, and even managing home health care through telemedicine is our new vertical that each hospital, including ours, has developed. Not only is it is more cost effective, it has increased our reach to much more people, and we have been able to attend to many more serious life-threatening conditions through the digital platform to those people who are not suffering from COVID. So in brief, this is the time for all of us to share our best practices, our concerns, and create a collaborative effort, not just within the country, within the public and the private sectors, but understand from each one of you, how do we take it forward? With that, because of the constraint in time, thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Devrina. And for want of time, I would move straight away to Ms. Zhu. I think it is very interesting to hear from your biodata that your company is involved in data collection using AI and creating and supporting the overall healthcare system. So I think what we would like to understand from you is which way we can actually get additional support across the BRICS country from your company in terms of improving the overall data collection and using artificial intelligence into every country of the BRICS nation. More importantly, relatively, China has done much better to handle the crisis. And we would also like to hear from you, your views, and why did it happen? And what are the things which China did right that helped the country to actually prevent the serious crisis going forward? So over to you, Ms. Zhang.
Thank you. Yes, first I would divide my talk into two parts. First is talking about how we, with the big good fortune, actually working to be the leading healthcare big data company that process over 100 million people data, working with over 700 leading hospitals in China. And we create our AI primary care. Is like a virtual doctor. In China, we don't have a established family doctor system, and we don't have qualified PCPs, primary care physicians. And with aging population, close to 230 million older people, and also the chronic disease, the population, it's like skyrocketing in the past 20 years. If you don't have a working primary care system, the healthcare system will be in very difficult position. So about 10 years ago, I and my colleagues from Silicon Valley, US, having lived there, worked there for 20 years, decided to come back to China to create virtual, what we call virtual or digital primary care doctor's assistant, which we covered close to 1,000 common diseases. And one anecdote, interestingly, so we deployed over 7 provinces, 2,000 hospitals, servicing about 10 million people, 4 million families in the last 4 years. And very interestingly, we helped last year, that leads to my second part, is last year we when Wuhan, the COVID-19 situation happened in Wuhan, we were called to help by creating an app for the families, which we simplify our CPC, the AI system into an app that the families can do self-evaluation on potential COVID symptoms. And they can send in their, the temperature. They can even do the self-diagnose on the, the chronic disease management and wellness care program. And then within a week, we deployed to about 40,000 families. And that was the first ever system that we, actually there's two systems. One is an app for the family. One is our, the AI system for the primary care doctors, and the data in the back, they can see, the family, they send in the temperature, they send in their requests, and even have the family had their own valuation based on the AI system. And so the doctors, when there's this need, the family can reach out to the doctors, and doctors can reach out to the family, and with the data, supported by the data. So it makes it more efficient for the doctors to manage more families and with big data support. So we got a national award for that. And also interestingly, we, through this program, we also connect with the specialist when there's even at home, when the Wuhan was shut down, the whole China was shut down during last year. Our system allowed the families to have chronic disease management with data sent to the primary care doctors, connected when it is necessary. We would, the data would directed to the specialist, like cardiovascular doctors, who will provide telemedicine consultants for both the family and with the support of the primary care doctors, because the family would have a hard time to manage, say, chronic disease with just a specialist support, right? They need a primary care doctor to give them day-to-day support. So we say this is like a 3 AI system in one. One AI cloud is the primary care AI cloud to enable, empower ordinary doctors, family, community clinics doctors who are not as qualified to have the capacity to see over 1,000 common diseases. So that's the first AI system. The second AI system, as you say, is, as I said, it's we call it Family Wellness Care AI. This is an app to enable families to have even like self-management if they can. If they have questions, they support, their primary care doctors can support them. And then the third AI cloud is a specialist AI cloud based on the data, at home data, or the primary care doctor's data, or then we integrate the data and direct, send the individual or families the data to the specialists, with the specialists to support primary care doctors to care for the families. So this 3-in-1 AI system actually was quite innovative. So I was very fortunate and feel honored to be awarded the Munan Award for this the first BRICS Women's Innovation Contest last month. And in that context, I actually explain how I do this 3 AI clouds in one. And so that answer first question, that with this 3 AI cloud, it helps China to establish, hopefully, quickly by we have signed contracts with many private sector partners, and with potential, actually, their clients, over 60 million clients. We hope we could roll out this deployment this year and next year. For the Chinese, dealing with COVID, also a lot of new technology and IT technologies, in addition to our AI, to help the doctors and the families better manage their situation, is we have, number one is the whole, the whole China, they use barcode for tracking your travel, your commute. So whenever there's one, say, 1 or 2 people who are confirmed cases, and we can tracking the people who are, it's like a network through the IT, the barcode for traveling. We can immediately identify who have been in the same location. So then the second, with that IT technology, the nationwide COVID tracking barcode system, the government, the second major point is the central government, healthcare departments, and the provincial and the city and the community, the whole system, it's a coordinated one. That's another major achievement, I would say, for China to control the COVID. It's a coordinated effort because of data. Again, because of that tracking data, we'll be able to have coordinated effort or different levels of medical institution and the government, and also have fast response to isolate the people who have confirmed, who are confirmed patient for COVID. So the digital platform, the big data system in China actually helped tremendously to deal with this situation. And the third thing I would say, the public support for wearing a mask, trying to stay in the community, even though with all the restriction, because for the goodness of the public. So when you identified you have 1 or 2 conferences in the community, the government will ask you to stay at home, and you will like a 99% people would volunteer or with some support. They will stay at home. So I think that really helped the public. So the big data system, tracking system, the supporting infrastructure, the coordinated effort, to create that fast response based on data, and then the public awareness to support the government's fight for the COVID. The challenges is, I think the downside, if you say, is how to do the balance, because when you isolate, you have to basically do the isolation of the community or even a city, like as the second wave in the city of Yangzhou, for example, a very active economic area, but you cannot travel to their city. They cannot travel outside. Even Beijing, where I am now, we still advising people not to travel outside Beijing, and basically with very hard restriction to allow people to come to Beijing. And think about the major economic and political and cultural capital with 26 million people. The restriction of travel or people's volunteering giving them travel actually, I think the cost on the economy and also the balance, I think how to strike the balance to have people, we need to, figure out a way, and maybe there's some evaluation in the future, how to use more, I would like to see more big data to analyze if we allow some sort of freedom, less restriction, would that be, still be fine? And we have to live with the COVID anyway. So I'm confident with China's massive use of big data and AI, and that's partially my company's fortunate success in a few years in this space, is to allow to encourage use high tech to support both the healthcare system, to make it more efficient for primary care doctors and even the specialists to care for people at home with their data, right? And also to help fight the COVID. And because of time, thank you so much for sharing our experience in China.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was very interesting to hear your views.
Спасибо.
For want
Это
of time, I will not
очень
do
интересно было услышать вашу точку зрения.
Okay, please don't interfere. So I would straight away move to Dr. Star was my colleague on the BRIC Executive Council on Healthcare. And I think I would like basically to request you to highlight two things. One is that what really we can do about the vaccine when the vaccine countries suffered because vaccine not being available. And second is how does Africa can handle the overall situation as far as COVID is concerned. And public-private contribution can be done.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Patel, distinguished and esteemed panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good day, whichever part of the world you're in. Of course, it's a great pleasure and an honor to be speaking on this esteemed panel once again. This year, we are addressing not only a very important subject matter, but equally a subject matter which required extensive resource mobilization, extensive collaboration, and of course, extensive trust. I speak, of course, with the backdrop of the South African experience. For all those colleagues who are unaware, South Africa, like many other parts of the world, and in particular the BRICS countries, seem to have been disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, whether it's in terms of lives lost or livelihoods destroyed or economic distress. I'm going to make 2 points or address 2 areas, I should say, by way of responding to the topic and by way of responding to how our chairman, Mr. Patel, has set out the topic today. Let me in the first instance speak about the private-public collaboration in South Africa between the private and the public sector. Our Brazilian colleague, Ms. Vaz, has indicated the primary care model that is well known. In fact, Aspen has quite a big business in Brazil, so we're well acquainted with that model. We have a very different healthcare model in South Africa. We have a very distinct private sector and a very distinct public sector. The private sector, of course, covers the insured segment of the population. The public covers the uninsured segment. And the two are very distinct, and they rarely cross over, if at all. However, cometh the crisis, cometh the solutions, right? And we realized very early on, as the private sector, as business, Aspen Pharmacare, the company I'm representing here, has been at the forefront of this. We realized very early on that this pandemic, from international experience, is much bigger than the private sector and much bigger than the public sector. It's much bigger than any company. It's much bigger than any individual. And we realized very early on that we had to forge a strong private-public collaboration that was centered around saving lives and livelihoods. We realized that very early on. And a number of interventions, many of them innovations, arose as a consequence of this. The first one was the formation and establishment of what we have come to know in South Africa as the Solidarity Fund. The Solidarity Fund is a fund that is premised on strong governance, private and public decision-making, has a board of directors that constitutes broad representation from society. And this fund was set up to respond to those emergency areas where government and or private sector could not directly respond. Primarily with government, because government, of course, we know, has tedious and bureaucratic administrative processes. So we realized very early on, you needed a fund that is more flexible and responsive to a crisis or an emergency. Many private companies, private individuals contributed funding to the Solidarity Fund, and the Solidarity Fund was able to respond to various key interventions in the overall national COVID effort of South Africa. Of course, we've had 3 waves of the pandemic. We're currently in the midst of a 3rd wave. Fortunately, the numbers are declining, and long may that last, and long may we get out of this 3rd wave. But during the first wave, the response of the Solidarity Fund and business got together and created and established what has come to known as B4SA, Business for South Africa. And I was appointed as the health lead for Business for South Africa. Business for South Africa collaborated and continues to collaborate across the depth and breadth of government. It represents small, medium, and large business in South Africa, and it looked at 3 interventions. The first intervention was at providing inputs and a blueprint of what has now come to be known as the South African COVID Economic Recovery Plan. This is a very important blueprint because it sketches out the pathway to recovery. It's important for investors. It's very important for colleagues that are on this call. It's important to say that South Africa is taking certain interventions, applying certain instruments in order to bring about an expedient recovery in the economy, to open up the economy, and to once again start trading with international partners like yourselves. The second area of intervention was at the level of labor, the labor market, where many people lost their jobs. There were various schemes put into place to address those that had either been retrenched or whose businesses had fallen into economic hardship. And the final area was at the level of healthcare. That's the area that I chair, and there were multiple interventions. The innovative thing here was that for the first time, the private sector started admitting public sector patients under an arrangement, and no patient, regardless of whether they were insured or uninsured, were turned away during the first and second waves. The same applies for the 3rd wave. Chairman, I don't have enough time to cover all of these interventions, but suffice to say, this was an innovative way of dealing with the crisis, and it led to unprecedented collaboration between the private and the public sector. That collaboration continues today. The single most important program in South Africa, and I'd suggest globally, and certainly in all our colleague countries here, whether it's Brazil, India, China, or Russia, is the vaccine rollout program, the COVID vaccine rollout program. We need to vaccinate as many global citizens in our own country as we possibly can. Only if we vaccinate vast swathes of the population will we return to normality. It is so true, Mr. Patel. You as an esteemed colleague, we've spoken many times, we've even discussed this on a call, I remember. It is so important to recognize that none of us are safe until we are all vaccinated, or the majority of us are all vaccinated. And the sooner we get that right, the sooner we can start returning to our old ways, enjoying the things that we so enjoy, and also opening up our economies and relieving the economic distress and hardship that all our global citizens and BRICS citizens are currently suffering from. Which leads me to the second part of my conversation, which is a more Aspen-centric conversation. Aspen, when you introduced me, is a South African company with a very strong global footprint. We have manufacturing in Brazil, manufacturing in India. We have partners, technology partners in Russia, and of course, we have a business in China. And we had a look as Aspen very early on. In fact, last March, our first reported case of COVID was on the 6th of March in South Africa. And literally a few days before that, we had a look at an Aspen management team and said, what is it that we can do to contribute in South Africa and globally to the pandemic? And as with all the other colleagues on this call and all the other, many Indian colleagues I spent so many years with, we all responded in the best way we can. And that is you produce cost-effective medicines and you make them accessible to the population. Aspen has invested strongly in sterile capability. We have extensive sterile capability. And as we looked at this, we saw that there was vaccine nationalism or an uneven distribution and supply of vaccines globally. I'm afraid to say it's rather sad that our economies and Africa, because I'm here representing Africa, not just South Africa, Africa has only received 2% or less of the global COVID vaccines. If you look at the global average, it's 25%. If I look at the developed economies, it's 54%. So you can see there is significant uneven distribution of vaccines globally. It's an untenable and undesirable situation to be in. It cannot continue. The only way to solve it, of course, is to develop local capacities and capabilities. And that's exactly what we've done as Aspen. We've partnered Johnson & Johnson to initially contract manufacture the J&J vaccine. I think it's a well-known vaccine. We know all the benefits of it. We selected J&J for a particular reason, but more especially, it is a more friendly vaccine for the African continent, and that's why we selected it. There are many other partners on this call that we are working closely with as a collaborative effort. And all we really want to do is we want to vaccinate as many people as swiftly as possible so we can get on with our lives. Mr. Patel, we can watch cricket, South Africa and India playing again. It would be a great pleasure to do that. So let me start finishing off by saying when it came to partnering Johnson & Johnson, I need to commend Johnson & Johnson. They are a company that are walking the talk. They are assisting in producing capacity on the continent. As you know, we would have signed up to manufacture up to 300 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. We're in fact the biggest contract manufacturer and also the one that was the most rapid in getting product to market for and on behalf of Johnson & Johnson. We the only manufacturer in the Southern Hemisphere and on the African continent that is producing the J&J vaccine. It's something we're particularly proud of. But what it has done is it's allowed us to work together with governments on the African continent to further expand capacities. And as you would have seen, the African Union has committed to purchasing 400 million Johnson & Johnson vaccines. A significant swathe or part of that will come from Aspen's manufacturing facilities on the southern tip of the African continent. Let me end off, because I don't wish to be too verbose on this call, again to recognize how important it is that we collaborate across the BRICS countries in finding pharmaceutical and healthcare solutions and establishing health security for the citizens of all of our countries. I believe BRICS is particularly good and sensitive to putting the patients first and to putting our people first. And again, of course, in all 5 countries, we compete against each other in the pharmaceutical industry. But we also have scope to collaborate and cooperate with each other, to complement each other. And I believe it is in that spirit that we have individually as countries, individually as companies on this call, whether it's Artemis or any other. You will notice, Dr. Devlina, in my background here, you will see Artemis herself, right? The goddess of hunting. So there are many ways we can collaborate whilst we compete. And I think that is the main message I wanted to leave you with, that the collaboration between private and public sector in my country has been extraordinary. At times, it has been unprecedented. And it is the only way that we can defeat this pandemic or any future pandemic. But we should also remember that we are part of the BRICS formation, and this opens up the way for us to collaborate in those areas that are complementary or where we are able to harness each other's respective strengths. It's been a great pleasure speaking to you this morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. And I am indeed privileged to have shared the platform with such an esteemed panel today. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dr. Star Wars. I think for want of time, I will not go into big summary, but I would just highlight few points which came out very clearly. We are in an industry where we compete and also collaborate. And I think that's the spirit with which Dr. Star Wars just mentioned, we need to work together. Few of the things which also the cross-learning tells us is the digital technology. It's going to be very, very important for us. And I think there we need to collaborate, work together. How do we leverage digital technology more to some of these healthcare problems, not only the current one, but also the future one and the existing one in the chronic disease area. More interestingly, using of teleconsultancy, using big data, data analytics and artificial intelligence becomes a very important part of it. Some of the best practices which is adopted in India or China or Brazil or South Africa or in any other part of the world, it is going to be Russia. It's going to be very important for us to learn from each other so that the best practices can be done, because the current challenge is no one person can solve, no one country can solve. It needs a global effort to make it successful. And I think that's why one need to work together to make sure. I think India and South Africa has been working together that any research which is happening in this particular area of COVID and the pandemic should be available to everybody without any restriction. And I hope one agree to make that happen. Finally, I think I would like to thank everybody here who has contributed to this session. It was very encouraging and learning session. I hope that you have coordinates of others. Otherwise, you can approach the FICCI office who can help you to get contact details of others. We can be in touch to work together in terms of helping our people across our countries. Thank you very much for joining.